The airport was full of noise. People were rushing to their gates, flight announcements echoed through the halls, and children cried while parents tried to calm them. But in the middle of all the movement, one woman stood still, tall, calm, and confident. Her name was Danielle Carter. She wore a simple white blouse, clean black pants, and carried a brown leather handbag. Her hair was tied neatly, and her eyes looked focused. She wasn't rich in appearance, but there was something about her that made people turn and look. Danielle was waiting in the security line, just like everyone else. She held her boarding pass in one hand and her ID in the other. But then, a voice came from behind the desk. "Excuse me, ma'am," said a TSA officer loudly. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Danielle turned and saw him, Officer Riley, a tall man with a rough voice and cold eyes. He was known for being rude to passengers, especially those he didn't like the look of. "Yes," Danielle asked politely. "I need to check your ID again," he said, grabbing it from her hand before she could respond. Danielle was confused. "Is something wrong?" Riley looked her up and down, then laughed. "You don't look like someone who can afford this ticket." People in the line turned to look. A few passengers began recording with their phones. Danielle felt the eyes on her, but she stayed calm. "I have a first-class ticket. Is that a problem?" she asked. Riley smirked. "Where did you get it? Found it on the ground? Or maybe someone gave it to you out of pity?" Danielle didn't answer. She knew what was happening. He wasn't checking her ID. He was testing her patience. He looked at her bag and frowned. "Is that real leather? Seems fake. Probably a cheap copy." Danielle didn't move. The officer opened her bag without permission. "Sir," she said gently, "you can't do that without cause." "Cause?" He laughed again. "I don't need a cause. I just don't like liars." His voice was louder now. Other people in the line were getting uncomfortable. Some whispered, some looked away, and some kept recording. Danielle took a deep breath. She had been through worse in life. This wasn't the first time someone judged her by her skin, her clothes, or her silence. But she had learned something long ago. Silence has power. She didn't fight. She didn't argue. She simply reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Then, in a calm voice, she said just one sentence. "He's on his way." The officer blinked. "What?" Danielle didn't repeat. She just looked at him, eyes steady, voice calm. "I suggest you stop," she said. "You won't like what happens next." Riley scoffed. "Oh, is your boyfriend gonna come rescue you?" Danielle said nothing. She stepped aside and waited quietly, letting others pass through security. The airport buzzed with more whispers now. People were watching her, but more importantly, they were watching him. The cop who had just mocked a woman who didn't fight back. A young man in the line whispered to his friend, "Who do you think she called?" Another replied, "I don't know, but did you see how calm she was?" 20 minutes passed. Danielle stood near the security gate, looking at the runway through the big glass windows. Riley kept glancing at her, now a little nervous. Suddenly, a voice came over the loudspeaker. "Attention. Private jet landing on emergency strip 3. All ground crew prepare immediately." People turned toward the windows. It wasn't normal for a private jet to land there. Riley looked out too, then turned to Danielle. She was already walking toward the gate. Calm, composed, unbothered. The crowd was still whispering. The private jet outside had landed. Its sleek silver body reflected the bright sun, and all eyes at the airport turned toward the runway. But Danielle didn't move fast. She stood still, watching. She knew that jet. She knew what it meant. And suddenly, she was no longer in the airport. She was back in her past. 15 years ago. Danielle was only 22. She stood outside a small diner with her baby boy in her arms. The night was cold. Her hands were shaking. Her coat was too thin, and she had no place to go. She had just lost her second job. People walked by. Some looked at her, but no one stopped. No one cared. She remembered whispering to her son, "It's going to be okay. I promise." But at that moment, she wasn't sure she believed it. A man had come out of the diner then, a stranger in a leather jacket. He saw her standing there and paused. "You hungry?" he asked. Danielle looked up, surprised. I don't have any money." The man smiled. "I didn't ask you that." He bought her food, sat with her, listened to her story without judging, and before he left, he gave her a folded card. "If you ever want a better life," he said, "call this number." Danielle looked down. The card said only one thing: scare. Back to the present. Danielle slowly walked toward a bench near the window. She sat down, closed her eyes, and let herself remember everything she had survived. She had faced rejection. She had been mocked for how she looked. She had cleaned hotel rooms, waited tables, worked late shifts just to afford milk for her baby. But she never gave up. She had that card in her wallet for 2 years before she was brave enough to call it. And when she finally did, her whole life changed. Flashback. The interview. She remembered walking into the Sky Air Training Center. She had no formal education, no airline experience, just a fire inside her to build something better. They almost didn't hire her. But one man in the room stopped the others and said, "Give her a chance. She has the eyes of a fighter." That man was the same man she had met at the diner. She didn't know it then. She didn't know he was the owner of the airline. But he watched her grow. She started at the bottom, cleaning the lounge, then front desk, then flight check-in. And slowly, step by step, she learned everything. She became one of Sky Air's top trainers, then manager, and finally, the co-director of the private charter division. But even after all that, she stayed humble. She didn't tell anyone who she was married to. She didn't tell anyone she was Mrs. Lewis, wife of Adam Lewis, CEO and founder of Sky Air. Back to the airport. Officer Riley was still pretending to be busy. But inside, his stomach was twisting. People were watching him now, some with anger, some with amusement. And then it happened. The doors opened. A line of security guards came through first, parting the crowd. Behind them, a man in a gray suit walked in. Tall, calm, sharp eyes. He didn't speak. He just walked, straight toward Danielle. Officer Riley stepped forward, trying to look official. "Sir, this is a restricted area." The man didn't stop walking. But he did say one thing: "Touch her again, and you'll be the one searched." Riley froze. The crowd gasped. Danielle stood up. Her expression hadn't changed. Calm. Quiet. She looked at her husband and nodded. "You're late," she teased. He smiled slightly, blamed the jet. Then he turned to Officer Riley and said, "I believe you owe my wife an apology." Riley stuttered. "Your wife?" Danielle stepped forward, her voice soft but strong. "Yes, you mocked my bag. You mocked my ticket. You opened my belongings without cause." She leaned in slightly. "But you didn't mock a poor woman today. You mocked the co-owner of the airline." Gasps filled the room. Riley's face turned red. Passengers began clapping. Danielle looked around, her voice still calm. "I didn't need to scream to be respected," she said. "I just needed to stay quiet and let the truth arrive." Danielle sat in the back of the airport limousine now, the glass tinted, the city lights passing by outside. Next to her, Adam held her hand. He hadn't said much since they left the airport, but she knew him well. He was angry, but in silence, just like her. They were alike in many ways. But while the world was now watching her with respect, they had no idea what it took for her to get here. They didn't know her full story. Not yet. Years ago, Danielle was just a new trainee at Sky Air. Her uniform was secondhand, a little too big. Her shoes hurt. She was quiet and nervous. She didn't know how to use the check-in computer, and she made small mistakes. Passengers complained. Supervisors gave her warnings. But she never gave up. She came in early, left late, took notes in a small notebook she kept in her pocket. She asked questions. She practiced after her shift was over. She wanted to prove something, not to the world, but to herself, that she was more than her past, that she was worthy of respect. And slowly she grew. A turning point. One night, after working late, she was cleaning the front desk when she dropped a folder. Papers flew everywhere. A man in a suit kneeled beside her to help. It was Adam Lewis. She didn't know who he was, just thought he was another manager. "I've seen you work," he said. "You don't quit. I like that." Danielle smiled politely. "I have no choice." He looked at her, curious. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "I have a son, and I promised him a better life." Adam didn't ask more. He just nodded and said, "Then don't stop, because you're going places." From that day on, things began to change. Danielle got promoted to gate supervisor, then lead coordinator, and with every new role, she kept learning, kept improving. But the world didn't make it easy. There were whispers. "She's moving up because she's pretty. She's just lucky. She's not management material." Danielle heard it all. But instead of replying, she worked harder. When others slept, she studied. When others took breaks, she trained new staff. She didn't need people to believe in her. She had already believed in herself. And through it all, Adam was watching. He began inviting her to leadership meetings, asked for her opinion during crisis situations, trusted her when others didn't. She slowly began to trust him too. At first, it was just work. Then came late-night calls. Then dinners. Then long conversations about life, pain, and dreams. Danielle was afraid to fall for someone again. But Adam was different. He listened without judgment. He didn't care about where she came from. He cared about where she was going. The proposal. One evening, after a long business trip, Adam took her to a rooftop overlooking the city. "I've seen your fight," he said. "I've seen your kindness. I've seen your strength." Then he opened a small box. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a gold wing-shaped pin, a symbol of sky air. "I don't just want you in my life," he said. "I want you beside me, in love and in business, as my partner." Danielle cried that night, not because of the offer, but because for the first time in her life, someone saw her worth without her having to prove it. Back to the present. The limo stopped in front of a luxury hotel. Danielle and Adam stepped out, cameras flashing, people whispering. Now everyone knew who she was. But she didn't care about that. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "I kept my promise, baby." She was talking to her son, now a teenager, smart and kind, who watched his mother build their world from nothing. In the lobby, a young black woman stood at the counter. Her hands were shaking. Her bag was worn. Her voice was low. Danielle saw herself in her. She walked over and asked, "First time in the city?" The girl nodded. Danielle smiled warmly. "Don't worry, you'll rise." And with that, she handed her a Sky Air business card. The girl looked confused. Danielle just said, "Call that number when you're ready to fly." Officer Riley couldn't sleep. That night, after Danielle and her husband left the airport, his name was all over the internet. Someone had recorded the entire scene. The video was now going viral. Racist TSA officer mocks black woman at airport, gets humbled in front of crowd. The comments were brutal. He should be fired. She handled it with so much grace. A queen. Imagine mocking the wife of the airline owner. Riley sat on his couch, staring at the screen, pale and sweating. He thought it would all blow over, but it didn't. The call. The next morning, Riley was called into the airport director's office. He walked in, trying to act calm, but his hands were shaking. The director didn't even ask him to sit. "We reviewed the video, Riley," the director said coldly. "You violated multiple TSA rules. Racial profiling, illegal bag check, public humiliation." Riley tried to speak. "Sir, I didn't know who she was." The director cut him off. "That's the problem. You judged her based on her clothes and skin, not her behavior." There was silence in the room. "You're suspended, effective immediately." Riley's mouth opened, but no words came. His badge was taken, his ID deactivated, his locker emptied. Just like that, he was out. Meanwhile, Danielle sat in her private home office, the sun shining through the window. She was holding her morning coffee, reading emails. One of them was from the airport director. "We deeply apologize for your experience. The officer has been suspended, and we are taking steps to ensure nothing like this happens again." Danielle didn't smile. She didn't clap. She simply closed the email and whispered, "Let it be a lesson." But the story didn't end there. A few days later, Adam came into the room with a concerned look. "You should see this," he said, handing her his tablet. It was an interview. Officer Riley had spoken to a small news channel. He looked tired, unshaved, and angry. "She embarrassed me," he said. "She made me look like a fool. And now my family's suffering. My kids are being bullied. I lost everything because of one moment." Danielle listened quietly. She didn't feel angry. She felt something else. Pity. She knew what it felt like to lose everything. But unlike her, Riley had made his own downfall. Still, she didn't want revenge. She wanted change. The letter. Later that day, Danielle sat down to write. Not to the public, not to the press, but directly to Officer Riley. She sent it privately, with no signature except one line at the end. DC. Here's what it said. "You don't know my name, but you judged me as if you did. I stayed silent that day, not because I was weak, but because I've learned that power doesn't always need a voice. I've been where you are. I've lost jobs. I've been mocked. I've been ignored. But I never blamed others for my fall. I looked in the mirror and asked myself how I could rise again. You still have that chance. Don't waste it by blaming the wrong person." DC. Back at Riley's home. He sat alone, holding the letter. He read it again and again. For the first time, he didn't feel angry. He felt ashamed and inspired. Weeks later, a community center in the city posted a photo. Officer Riley, now clean-shaven, dressed in plain clothes, was volunteering, helping young people with career guidance. He had joined a local awareness group, not because of court orders, because he wanted to change. Danielle saw the photo online. She smiled faintly. "Good," she whispered. He chose to rise. The city was quiet that morning. Danielle sat in the kitchen, sipping tea. Her husband, Adam, was reading the newspaper, and their son, Jaden, was sitting across the table, head down, staring at his phone. Something was off. Jaden wasn't talking much these days. He barely smiled, barely looked up. He was 17 now. Tall, smart, kind-hearted, but distant. Danielle noticed. A mother always does. She reached across the table and gently touched his hand. "Jaden," she said softly, "talk to me." He looked up slowly, forcing a small smile. "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired." But Danielle wasn't convinced. She looked into his eyes and saw something. Fear. Later that day, Jaden sat alone in his room, headphones off, staring at his computer screen. He was watching the airport video again, the one of his mom being mocked by the officer. He had seen it over 50 times now, and each time it made his blood boil. But there was another reason he kept watching it. He had read every comment, every hateful reply, every racist message hidden under the fake usernames. And one of those usernames, he recognized it. It was someone from his school. Flashback. A week ago, Jaden had walked into school, expecting to just blend in. But something had changed. People stared at him. Some laughed quietly. One boy, Derek, the rich white kid from his class, smirked and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Look, it's the charity case. His mommy owns jets now, but she still looks like she works at baggage claim." Jaden had clenched his fists. But he walked away. He didn't want to cause trouble. His mom had worked too hard for peace. But inside, the fire burned. Back to the present. Jaden opened his drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were screenshots, messages, names. He had been collecting them. He wasn't planning revenge, but he was planning justice. He had started a project, a secret blog where he shared stories of people like his mother. People judged by their looks, their skin, their pasts. He called it Fly Higher, and within just 2 weeks, it had gone viral in student communities. He was using his voice, his truth, to inspire change. But he never told his mom. Not yet. Meanwhile, Danielle was in her office reading another apology email, this one from the TSA's national director. They were inviting her to speak on a panel about airport discrimination. Adam looked over her shoulder. "You should do it," he said. She sighed. "I don't like the spotlight." He smiled gently. "But you shine in it anyway." She smiled back. But before she could reply, she heard a soft knock. Jaden stood at the door. "Mom, can I show you something?" The reveal. Danielle sat beside Jaden as he opened his laptop and pulled up the blog. She scrolled through the stories. She read the comments, saw the shares. Her eyes filled with tears. "You did all this," she whispered. Jaden nodded. "I wanted people to know what you've been through, what so many go through. But I didn't use your name. I didn't want people to come after you again." Danielle reached out and hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you," she said. "So proud." A surprise email. Just then, Jaden's laptop pinged. A new message had come in. It was from a youth magazine, a big one. "We love your project. We'd like to feature your story. Are you available for an interview?" Danielle looked at Jaden. He looked nervous. "I don't know, Mom. What if they make it all about you? I want this to be about the message, not the drama." She smiled. "Then tell your story, your way. Don't let anyone else control your narrative." Jaden's story was everywhere now. His blog, Fly Higher, had exploded across the internet. The interview with the youth magazine was published, and soon after, he was invited to speak at a youth summit in New York. He talked about racism, about courage, about his mother's quiet strength. He didn't name her, but everyone knew who he meant. Danielle watched the broadcast from home with tears in her eyes. Adam stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "I never thought I'd see him speak like that," she whispered. Adam smiled. "That's your legacy, Dee. But the past never stays buried." Later that night, Danielle received a message on LinkedIn. The name made her heart stop. Marcus King. She hadn't heard that name in over 15 years. Marcus was her ex-husband, Jaden's biological father. He had walked out on them when Jaden was just a baby, left her with debt, no job, and a child to feed. He never came back. Not once. Not even a birthday card. And now, here he was, sending her a message. "Danielle, I saw the video. I saw our son. He's grown up strong. I want to talk. Please." She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she shut the laptop. She didn't reply. But Marcus wasn't done. 2 days later, a man showed up outside the Sky Air building. Dark jeans, leather jacket, tired eyes. Danielle was walking out when she saw him. She froze. He looked older, but she knew that face. He took off his cap and said softly, "Danielle." Adam stepped in front of her, protective. "You need to leave." But Danielle raised her hand. "No, let him speak." The They sat at a quiet table in a cafe across the street. Marcus stared at his hands, nervous. "I messed up," he said. "I was scared. I was young, and I didn't know how to be a father." Danielle didn't respond. He continued, "I saw Jaden on the news. The way he speaks, the way he carries himself. That's you. That's all you." Danielle looked at him, her voice calm but firm. "You don't get to come back because he's successful now. You don't get a pass." Marcus looked pained. "I don't want anything. I just want to say sorry. I've been sober for 6 years, working steady. No lies." Then he took something out of his pocket, a small photo. A picture of baby Jaden. "I've kept this all these years," he whispered. "I just wanted to see him. Once." Danielle stared at the photo. So many memories came flooding back. Nights alone. Bills unpaid. Holding Jaden in her arms, whispering, "We'll make it somehow." And now, this man wanted to walk in like nothing happened. Decision time. Later that night, Danielle told Adam everything. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just felt tired. "What do I tell Jaden?" she asked. Adam didn't give her advice. He just said, "You'll know what's right." So the next day, she sat with Jaden in the living room. "I need to tell you something," she said. And she told him everything. About Marcus. About the message. About the meeting. Jaden was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, "Did he say why he left?" "He was scared," she replied. "But that doesn't excuse it." Jaden looked down. Then up. "I want to meet him. Just once." Danielle felt her heart twist. "Are you sure?" Jaden nodded. "I don't want a father. I already have Adam. But I need to look in his eyes and decide for myself." The meeting. They met in a public park. Danielle stayed back as Jaden walked slowly toward Marcus. They stood face to face for a moment. No hugs, no handshakes, just silence. Then Jaden asked, "Why now?" Marcus looked at him with watery eyes. "Because I lost my chance once. I don't want to die knowing I didn't at least try to fix it." Jaden didn't cry. He didn't smile either. He simply said, "I hope you mean it." And then, after a long pause, he turned and walked back to his mother. At home. That night, Danielle sat with Adam on the balcony again. "Did I do the right thing?" she asked. Adam held her hand. "You did what only a strong woman could do. You let your son decide his story." Danielle looked up at the stars once more. Same place, same sky. But her world had changed. Not because of her past, but because she'd chosen to rise, again and again. A month had passed since the world saw Jaden's interview. Since Danielle faced the man who once abandoned her. Since the officer who mocked her was officially dismissed after a full investigation. Life was moving again, but not backward. Forward. Danielle sat inside her office at Sky Air headquarters, looking at the photo of her family on the desk. Adam, Jaden, and her, all smiling, all healed in different ways. A soft knock at the door. Her assistant peeked in. "Ma'am, your jet is ready. You're expected in Washington in 3 hours." Danielle stood, her expression calm, but inside, she felt something more. Today was big. She had been invited to speak at a global leadership summit, not just as a woman, not just as a business owner, but as a survivor. As someone who had fought the system and won with grace, not anger. At the airport, she arrived like any other traveler. No press, no crowd, no fanfare. Just her black suit, a single suitcase, and quiet strength in her eyes. The same security gate, the same checkpoint where she had once been mocked, humiliated. The officer at the gate was new. He smiled respectfully, nodded and said, "Welcome, Mom." She nodded back. But as she stepped forward, she heard a voice behind her. "Danielle." She turned. A woman, about 60, nervous eyes, airline uniform. She stepped forward slowly. "I was there that day," the woman whispered, "when that officer mocked you. I didn't speak up. I was scared, and I've hated myself for it ever since." Danielle was quiet. The woman swallowed hard. I wanted to say I'm sorry." Danielle looked at her for a long moment. Then she smiled gently. "Thank you for telling me." And then she hugged her. Not for the woman's sake, but for her own healing. On the private jet, Adam sat reading a magazine. Jaden was listening to music. Danielle sat near the window, her speech in her hands. She looked out as the jet lifted off, clouds floating beneath them. Then she looked at her son. "You okay?" Jaden nodded. "Yeah. I've been thinking." "About?" He turned to her, serious. "About college. About working with you. About starting something of my own." Danielle smiled. "Whatever you choose, you'll fly." Jaden leaned his head back and closed his eyes. And for the first time in a long time, he looked peaceful. In Washington, D.C., the hall was packed. Leaders from every country. Reporters, celebrities, young students. Danielle stepped up to the microphone. The lights dimmed. Cameras clicked. She took a deep breath. And then she began. "I wasn't always strong. I wasn't always successful. I was once a single mother, standing in an airport with a crying baby, a broken suitcase, and no money for a cab." The crowd was silent. And one day, many years later, I stood in that same airport. This time in a clean suit, with a private jet waiting, and a husband who believed in me. But I was still mocked. Not because of my past, but because of how I looked. People leaned in closer, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I made a call. And the man on the other end of that call didn't come with fists. He came with power and peace. The room erupted in quiet claps. She continued. "Power doesn't always look like a badge or a title. Sometimes it looks like staying calm when the world expects you to break." A standing ovation began to rise. But she wasn't done yet. She looked directly into the cameras. "If you've ever been judged by your skin, your story, your silence, remember, you don't have to scream to be heard. Sometimes, the quietest voice carries the loudest power." Later that night, Danielle stood on the balcony of the hotel, looking out over Washington. Jaden stepped beside her. "I didn't say it earlier," he whispered, "but I'm proud of you." She looked at him, touched. "You mean the world to me, Jaden." He smiled. "I know, and I want to carry your name with pride, wherever I go." She pulled him close and whispered, "Then fly, baby. Fly higher than I ever did."